In the heart of a small town lived a man named Mark, who dedicated his life to a noble cause. He worked in the insulation department of low-income homes, tirelessly providing free help to those who needed it most. His work involved making homes more energy efficient, installing doors, insulation and other improvements to lower electric and gas bills and make living spaces more comfortable. His work was not just a job, but a mission to bring warmth and hope to those less fortunate. One chilly morning, Mark received a request to inspect a house on the outskirts of town. The call came from a man named Daniel who lived alone in a modest house at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. Upon pulling up to the house, Mark noticed that the neighborhood was going through a rough patch. Cracked sidewalks, overgrown lawns, and faded paint spoke of neglect and deprivation. As Mark approached Daniel's house, he was greeted by a middle-aged man with a tired smile. "Thank you for coming, Mark," Daniel greeted him. "I really need your help with my house. I'm having a very hard time keeping it warm in the winter time." Mark nodded, always sympathetic to the stories he encountered. "Of course, Daniel. Let's start by taking a look around." Daniel led Mark inside and they began the inspection. Everything looked relatively normal until Mark asked about the location of the water heater, a standard part of the inspection process. Daniel paused for a moment, then pointed to the kitchen and began moving the refrigerator. This action caused Mark a slight alarm, but he brushed it off, following Daniel into the kitchen. When Daniel lifted the refrigerator, a hidden entrance to the basement was revealed underneath. Mark was surprised. In all his years on the job, he had never seen such a device. Nevertheless, he knew he needed to check the water heater before proceeding. Pulling out his flashlight, Mark peered down the stairs into the dimly lit basement. He wasn't just looking for the water heater, he was also checking for potential safety hazards, especially carbon monoxide emissions. As he looked around the room, a sense of unease never left him. The first disturbing find was the skeleton of a cat whose fur had long since fallen out, turning to bones. Although such things were not uncommon in basements and crawl spaces, a shiver ran down Mark's spine. He took a few steps down the stairs, continuing his inspection, and then noticed several more small animal skeletons scattered throughout the basement. Mark's uneasiness grew into full-blown alarm. There were at least 10 animal skeletons, some of them so decayed that he couldn't even distinguish their original appearance. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and his instincts were screaming at him. Daniel was standing at the entrance, silent, resting his hand on the cellar door. Mark's heart raced as he realized the danger he could be in. He was 4 steps from the door to the outside, and adrenaline was bubbling in his veins. With a sinking heart, Mark decided he couldn't take any chances. He told Daniel he needed more tools from his truck and promised to be back soon. Hurrying to his vehicle, he marked the job as impossible due to safety concerns. Driving away from that creepy house on the outskirts of town, Mark couldn't shake the feeling of doom that gripped him. He had no concrete evidence of danger, but something about this situation seemed completely wrong to him. It was a day he would never forget. Days turned to weeks, and Mark kept pondering the decision he had made. Should he have reported the strange occurrence to the police? What to do about the dead animals? In the basement, he decided not to file a formal report, citing that it was not unusual in his job to find animal remains in basements and on shelves. Young couple Amelia and Daniel set off on a journey through the rugged and remote landscapes of rural Tasmania. Tasmania is known for its untouched wilderness, and they were eager to explore its beauty. As they boarded the bus, they discussed their plans for the next 2 weeks filled with hiking, camping, and exploring the natural wonders of the island. Sitting in front of them on the bus was a mysterious girl with striking facial features. Her hair was a deep crimson hue and her eyes seemed to hold secrets. Intrigued by her presence, Amelia and Daniel struck up a conversation with her, sharing their travel plans. To their surprise, she offered them a place to stay in her town, smiling cordially. They politely declined her offer, as they had already decided on their future itinerary. However, the girl insisted and handed them a piece of paper with her cell phone number, urging them to change their minds. She explained that she and her partner would be happy to host them if they changed their minds. A few days later, the couple found themselves at a crossroads. Their original plan no longer seemed as appealing as before, and the idea of staying with the mysterious girl and her partner piqued their curiosity. After a brief discussion, They decided to call her and take her up on her offer. Amelia dialed the number and the girl's voice on the other end of the line was warm and friendly. She confirmed that they were still welcome to host them and suggested they meet at the local train station. Amelia and Daniel agreed, excited at the prospect of a new adventure. However, as soon as they arrived at the train station and met the girl and her partner, a sense of unease swept over them. Their intuition told them that something was wrong, but they couldn't figure out what it was. Putting aside their doubts, they followed the couple, who at first glance seemed quite friendly. There was an air of desolation about the town: dilapidated houses, overgrown gardens, boarded-up windows. As they traveled deeper into the town, the houses became more and more dilapidated, and there were no people to be seen. Their hosts led them to the very outskirts of the town, where they reached the last house. The inside was sparse and the living room was a strange setting. A single mattress lay in the center, surrounded by a dangling sheet. As their host showed them around, they avoided one door, refusing to explain what lay behind it. Their guest room looked perfectly ordinary, a neatly made bed and dresser. Amelia and Daniel found it odd that their hosts preferred to sleep on mattresses in the living room when they seemed to have a spare guest room. Back in the living room, the couple turned their attention to the disturbing sight of knives. Knives of various shapes and sizes were spread out on the table, and Daniel casually inquired if their hosts were hunters, but the answer came in the negative. To their surprise, his partner handed Daniel a massive Bowie knife, and he couldn't help but notice the bloodstains along the edge of the blade. Putting the knife aside, he laughed involuntarily. Daniel's curiosity was further piqued when he saw the tattoo gun. Though as the discussion progressed, the young couple learned that neither of them had tattoos, and there was a small hatchet by the door, which caused Amelia to wonder and make her ask if they were collecting firewood. The answer was the same as the previous ones, a simple and disturbing no. There was tension in the room, and suddenly the male host announced that he needed to go to the store. Amelia and Daniel seized the opportunity to escape the creepy environment and quickly agreed to join them. As they left the house, the couple noticed that their hosts were heading in the opposite direction to the town. Amelia spoke up, questioning their choice of direction. The man explained that it would be more interesting to follow the path through the trees, since it led uphill, and promised that it would take the same amount of time. Alarm bells rang in Amelia's head, but Daniel brushed off her concerns, deciding that everything would be fine. They followed their host deep into the forest, leaving the town behind, their anxiety growing with each step. Finally, the girl turned to her partner and asked in a whisper, "So, where is this place?" Amelia and Daniel froze in place. Panic gripped them. It was clear that they were in grave danger. Amelia insisted that they turn back and head into town, her heart pounding with fear. When they reached the only store in town, Amelia and Daniel realized the gravity of their situation. No one in the store recognized their owners, even though the town was small and friendly. The couple needed to escape the ominous scenario immediately, so they made an excuse they wanted to see the local sights and meet their hosts later. They hastily checked into a hotel room and locked themselves inside, trembling with fear and shock. Amelia could not escape the feeling that they had narrowly escaped a terrible fate. In the safety of the hotel room, they began to investigate their hosts. Thoughts raced as they pondered what might have awaited them if they hadn't followed their instincts and escaped the clutches of the mysterious couple. In one quiet town, located deep in the Appalachian Mountains, there was a hidden gem, Forbidden Ridge. This place of natural beauty, serene forests, and spacious glades became a regular vacation spot for a group of adventurous friends. Among them were Jack, an energetic outdoorsman, Emily, an intrepid photographer, Mark, a rational thinker, and Sarah, a nature lover. One crisp fall evening, they set out on a familiar hike to Forbidden Ridge. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a warm golden light over the forest canopy. They chatted and laughed as they made their way along the well-trodden trail and enjoyed the peace and quiet. When they reached a clearing on a ridge, the friends stopped to enjoy the breathtaking view. The hills spread out before them, their colors intensified in the rays of the setting sun. This was a place they had visited countless times before, but today they realized that this was their last visit. About a quarter mile away, on a neighboring ridge, an unexpected sight appeared before their eyes. Against the purple sky, they saw a woman sitting on a horse. A strange phenomenon, for the Forbidden Ridge was not famous for horsemen. What is she doing here? Wondered Jack, furrowing his brows in puzzlement. The woman looked out of place, her posture unsteady. Her long, disheveled hair fluttered in the evening breeze, and empty bottles jingled in her saddlebag. It was evident that she was drunk, for her slurred words reached her friends. You're on my property," shouted the woman, both anger and excitement audible in her voice. The friends exchanged anxious glances. They hadn't run into anyone on Forbidden Ridge, and they were sure they hadn't crossed any property lines. "We didn't know it was your property," Emily replied, trying to defuse the situation. The woman's anger only intensified. She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a gleaming revolver from there. Panic gripped the group as they realized the gravity of the situation. Without warning, the woman fired several shots in their direction, the deafening crackle echoing through the woods. Jack, Emily, Mark and Sarah jumped to their feet in terror. The shots rang out too close, and the danger was real. Without thinking, they rushed out of the clearing, scrambling through the thickets, following the path they had come from. Adrenaline fueled their escape, making them strain to the limit. Back at their campsite, located in the heart of the friends collapsed breathless and shivering. They recalled the horrific encounter with the intoxicated woman and the bullets that whizzed dangerously close to them. During the weeks that followed, the incident at Forbidden Ridge never left their minds. They could not shake off the sense of foreboding and could not understand how they had unknowingly trespassed on someone else's territory. They examined maps and land records, but found no indication that there were any possessions nearby. Despite their curiosity, none of them ventured back to the ridge. Memories of an angry woman on horseback firing a revolver in their direction were enough to keep them away from this once favorite place. The sun hung low in the western sky, casting a warm golden light on the Shenandoah River. Robbie and his wife, Miranda, had taken a peaceful canoe trip to get a break from the hustle and bustle of the city. The Shenandoah River, with its gentle current and lush nature, was the perfect setting for their adventure. As they floated down the winding river, the only government property was the islands that dotted its bed. These islands were often camped on by those who went on multi-day treks. It was an idyllic day and they were anxious to find a suitable island to camp on. As dusk fell, they came upon an island where two women were using machetes to cut their way through dense thickets. It looked like they had decided to clear a place to camp, and the young couple decided to join them, deciding it was a great idea to share the island. They paddled half a mile down the island, found a suitable spot by the riverbank, and set up camp. The women, whose names were Lisa and Emily, introduced themselves as fellow adventurers. They exchanged pleasantries and stories around the campfire. It seemed that the night was off to a good start, but the peaceful evening took a disturbing turn when, in the dead of night, the pair were awakened by the sound of a machete rifling through a thicket. Robbie and Miranda exchanged worried glances as they listened to Lisa and Emily's manic screams, laughter, and shrieks as they set out to find and kill us. Fear gripped their hearts and they huddled together in the tent, trying to make sense of this terrifying situation. The moonlight filtered through the foliage, casting eerie shadows that danced around the camp. The once tranquil river now seemed threatening. Miranda and Robbie could hear the women approaching the camp, their voices growing louder and crazier. Panic gripped the couple and they contemplated whether to run, knowing that traveling along the river in the dark could be very dangerous. They had no phone signal to call for help, and the isolation of the island made it impossible to seek shelter elsewhere. The night was filled with tension. Every rustle of leaves or distant animal cry sent shivers down their spines. Miranda and Robbie took turns keeping watch with their makeshift weapons, a camp knife and a pile of firewood ready to defend themselves if necessary. As dawn broke, the sounds of machetes and the women's maniacal laughter finally fell silent. Exhausted and frightened, the couple decided this was their only chance to save themselves. They quietly gathered their belongings, loaded into a canoe, and swam away from the cursed island as fast as they could. Several hours passed, our arms aching from the continuous paddling. Finally, they reached the ranger station downstream, where they recounted their terrifying encounter with Lisa and Emily. The authorities assured them they would investigate, but due to the remoteness of the islands it would be difficult to do so. A few weeks later, they received a call from authorities. They found Lisa and Emily suffering from serious mental illness and living in a tent camp. On the riverbank, the girls were immediately taken into custody and received the help they needed. The ordeal left the young family scarred, but it also served as a reminder of the unpredictability of nature and the human mind. Their peaceful canoe trip down the Shenandoah River turned into a nightmare they will never forget. The tranquility of the river will forever be marred by the memories of that fateful night. A trip to Yellowstone National Park has always been one of those cherished memories for the Baker family. Patrick, the youngest of three brothers, was just a boy at the time. Their adventure began in a bustling California suburb and stretched across a vast expanse, a 17-hour drive to the pristine wilderness of Wyoming. The drive took several days, and their trusty Yukon 40 served as their vessel for the many miles of open road. Each night during the journey, the Baker family sought shelter in quaint motels, experiencing the joy of the open road by day and the comfort of a clean bed at night. But one night is forever imprinted on Patrick's memory, a night filled with anxiety and eerie events that would haunt him for years. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows on the winding road, Patrick's father decided to drive through the night to hasten their arrival. The family hoped to make up for the time lost due to a series of unforeseen delays. They drove in the dark, and Patrick's father was determined to reach their destination. Time was running out and the moon had risen to its zenith. Patrick and his brothers had fallen into a deep sleep hours ago, lulled to sleep by the hum of the engine and the rhythmic motion of the car. His father had been driving all night, and as the road stretched endlessly ahead, a sense of drowsiness took over him abruptly. He decided to stop the car on a forest island and sleep with all the shuttles of the family. In the darkest hours of that fateful night, Patrick opened his eyes. Disoriented and still half asleep, he looked around the car. Darkness enveloped everyone, and he felt an unusual sense of isolation. The interior of the car was filled with the rhythmic sounds of his family's quiet breathing. Patrick tried to force himself to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Boredom gnawed at him and the silence depressed him. He decided to explore his surroundings to break the monotony that hung over him like a shroud. Rummaging through his bag without disturbing his sleeping family, Patrick found solace in the form of a small plastic flashlight. Its soft yellow glow illuminated everything around him. Carefully, trying not to make a sound, he pressed his face against the window, peering into the impenetrable blackness. At first, he could only make out the outline of the forest that surrounded their resting place. The trees and bushes swayed in the night breeze. As he peered into the darkness, hoping to spot a night creature, the flashlight's beam revealed something that sent a shiver down his spine. Between two trees in the distance was a dark figure. It resembled the silhouette of a man, but it was eerily still. It didn't move or make any sound. Patrick's heart raced, and he couldn't take his eyes off it. He watched the figure closely, curiosity mixed with a growing sense of unease. Time seemed to drag on, and the shadowy figure did not move. Patrick's rational mind told him it was only a figment of his imagination or a natural phenomenon, but his intuition told him otherwise. Just as he thought about turning off the flashlight and going to sleep, a chill ran down his spine. The shadow shifted, turned 90 degrees, and disappeared behind one of the trees. It disappeared from sight, and terror clenched Patrick's heart like a vice. Fear took hold of him, and he turned off the flashlight without thinking. He pulled his sweater over himself to cover himself with it. His eyes squeezed shut, his fingers gripped the flashlight tightly. His ears pricked up to avoid hearing any sounds that might confirm his worst fears. Paralyzed by fear and adrenaline, Patrick sat in a fetal position, his thoughts racing, his heart pounding. The night stretched seemingly endlessly, and every rustle of leaves and quiet whisper of wind heightened his fear. As he waited for the light of dawn to pierce the impenetrable blackness, he plunged into the darkest corners of his imagination. Finally, as the first rays of sunlight colored the horizon, the Baker family stirred. Patrick, exhausted and weary, forced himself to relax and hide the excitement that had kept him up all night. He did not say a word about the shadowy figure he had seen in the woods.